One stormy night, I served 15 terrifying bikers, certain they'd ruin my life. I never imagined they'd return with an army, not to destroy, but to rebuild everything I thought I'd lost. The rain wasn't just falling. It was angry. It hammered against the thin windows of the corner Comet Diner, each drop a tiny fist trying to break through. The wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the old neon sign out front, until I was sure it would just rip free and shatter on the asphalt. It was Tuesday, my fourth double shift in a row, and my feet felt like 2 bags of broken glass. We had exactly 3 customers huddled in their booths, nursing coffees like they were the last drops of warmth on earth. I was just about to ask Gus, a perpetually grumpy cook, if we could close up early, when the bell above the door didn't just jingle. It screamed. 15 of them. That's how many bikers piled in, shaking the storm from their heavy leather jackets and bringing the smell of wet road and gasoline with them. They weren't just big. They were monuments of men, covered in denim and patches that read things like "Road Vultures" and "Last Disciples." Their boots thudded on the linoleum floor, a sound like a slow, deliberate drumbeat of trouble. The 2 old men in booth 4 threw some crumpled bills on their table and practically ran out the door, not even bothering to grab their coats. The lone woman in the corner sank lower behind her newspaper, her eyes wide with fear. My heart started thumping against my ribs like it wanted out. My hand, holding a coffee pot, trembled slightly. I live paycheck to paycheck, and that's on a good week. My son Leo needs new sneakers for school, and the rent is due on Friday. The last thing I needed was a brawl that would get me fired, or worse. I plastered on my best Waitress smile, the one that felt like it was cracking my face in two, and grabbed a stack of menus. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice coming out a little higher than I wanted. "Grab any seat you like. Coffee's fresh." They spread out, taking over half the diner, the springs of the old vinyl booths groaning in protest. They were loud, their laughter like rocks tumbling downhill, but they weren't mean. Not yet, anyway. The one who seemed to be the leader, a man with a beard as thick as a forest and a long gray braid down his back, sat at the head of the largest booth. He looked at me, his eyes surprisingly clear and calm. "Coffee sounds good, ma'am. For all of us. And whatever you've got that's hot and fast. We've been riding through this monster for hours." For the next hour, I moved faster than I ever had in my life. I was a blur of motion, slinging coffee, taking orders for 15 burgers, 15 fries, 15 Cokes. Gus was sweating and swearing over the grill, slapping patties down with a vengeance, but he was keeping up. I ran the food out. 2, sometimes 3 plates balanced on my arms. The men were polite. They said please and thank you. They cleared space on the tables for me. They weren't the monsters I'd built them up to be in my head. They were just cold, hungry men. I noticed one of the younger ones shivering, his jacket soaked through. On a whim, I walked over to the old thermostat on the wall, the one my boss, Mr. Henderson, kept locked on 68 degrees to save money. I nudged it up to 75. The warm air that kicked on a moment later felt like a collective sigh of relief. When they were done, the leader, who the others called Bear, flagged me down. He collected a pile of cash from the rest of the crew and pushed it into my hand. It was a thick, heavy wad of bills. "This should cover it, and then some," he said, his voice a low rumble. "For you. For being so kind on a night like this." I looked down at the money. It was more than my rent. It was Leo's new shoes and a full fridge and a bill paid on time. Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Bear just nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. He stood up, and the rest of his crew followed suit, the diner suddenly feeling vast and empty again. As he walked to the door, he turned back to me. "You treated us like people when most folks would have locked the door," he said, his gaze serious. "The road vultures don't forget something like that. We take care of our own." His words hung in the air, a strange mix of gratitude and something else I couldn't quite place. A promise, maybe. Or a warning. I spent the next hour cleaning up, my body aching, but my spirit lighter than it had been in months. I went home, slept soundly for the first time all week, and woke up feeling hopeful. I got Leo ready for school, humming a little tune, and walked to my morning shift at the diner. The sun was out, the sky washed clean by the storm. It was a beautiful day. But as I rounded the corner onto Main Street, I heard it. A low rumble, like distant thunder. But it wasn't thunder. The sound grew, a deep, guttural roar that vibrated through the soles of my worn-out shoes. I looked up, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't 15 bikes. It was a river of them. Hundreds, maybe 1,000. A sea of chrome and black leather, all flowing in one direction, all pulling up and parking, surrounding the little corner Comet diner on all sides. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a thank you. This was an invasion. I was frozen on the sidewalk, a statue of pure terror. The sound was a physical thing, a tectonic shift happening right on Main Street. The air itself was vibrating with the roar of 1,000 engines. Men and women in leather, patches from dozens of different clubs glinting in the morning sun, parked their bikes with practiced efficiency, forming a barricade of steel around the diner. Shopkeepers peered out of their windows, their faces pale. Mrs. Gable from the bakery was already on the phone, her hand trembling as she spoke. This was it. I had somehow, in my one small act of kindness, brought a war to this sleepy little town. My feet finally unstuck from the pavement, and I scrambled inside the diner, my heart hammering against my ribs. The bell shrieked behind me. "Mr. Henderson!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Mr. Henderson, you need to see this!" My boss, a man whose primary emotional states were annoyance and cheapness, burst out of his tiny office. He was a small, balding man with a perpetual sneer. He took one look out the window, and all the color drained from his face. He looked like a ghost in a stained apron. "What is this?" he squeaked, grabbing my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "What did you do? I knew it. I knew hiring you was a mistake. You brought this on us." I just gave them some coffee and burgers," I stammered, trying to pull my arm free. "They were caught in the storm." "You served the road vultures," he shrieked. "Are you insane? They're going to tear the place apart. Call the police. Someone call the police." But before either of us could move, the bell on the door chimed softly. It was a ridiculously gentle sound against the backdrop of the engine roar outside. Standing there was Bear, the leader from last night. He took off his sunglasses, his calm eyes surveying the scene, terrified, and Mr. Henderson, looking like he was about to have a heart attack. He looked even bigger in the daylight. "Ma'am," he said, his voice that same low rumble, ignoring my boss completely. "Hope we didn't startle you." Mr. Henderson puffed out his chest, a frightened little bird trying to look like a hawk. "You get out of my diner. All of you. I'm calling the cops." Bear didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed locked on me. "Last night," he began, his voice cutting through Henderson's panicked squeals. "You turned up the heat. No one asked you to. You saw we were cold and you just did it. You treated us like paying customers, not like trouble waiting to happen." He gestured with his thumb back towards the street. "I got on the network this morning, told them what you did, told them about this place, about the waitress who treated a few wet and tired brothers with some basic human decency. I was still confused, still terrified. What do you want?" I whispered. He finally smiled, and it transformed his face. The intimidating biker disappeared, replaced by someone's friendly, bearded grandpa. "Well, first," he said, 1,000 of my closest friends are real hungry. Hope your cook is ready for the busiest day of his life." My mind reeled at the thought of the tips. It was more money than I could even imagine. But then he continued, and his next words knocked the air from my lungs. "Second," he said, pointing a thick finger at the ceiling where a water stain was spreading, "we noticed the place is a little worn. That flickering light in the corner is a fire hazard. The vinyl on booth 3 is shot. The men's room toilet has been running since last Christmas." I stared at him, dumbfounded. How could he know all that? "My boys," he said with a wave of his hand towards the window. "They're not just riders. They're electricians, plumbers, carpenters, upholsterers. We figured, while we're all here having breakfast, we might as well fix the place up. For you. For me." The words echoed in my head. 1,000 bikers weren't here to destroy the diner. They were here to eat and to rebuild it. For me. A wave of dizziness and overwhelming gratitude washed over me. Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of disbelief and joy. The whole world had just tilted on its axis, showering me in impossible luck. But then, a sharp, greedy voice cut through my daze. "Well now, hold on a minute," Mr. Henderson said, stepping forward. He had a sickeningly sweet smile plastered on his face now. The fear was gone, replaced by a dollar-sign gleam in his eyes. He puffed up his chest again. "It's wonderful that you all appreciate my establishment. My diner has always been a welcoming place." He smoothed his apron, then turned and looked directly at me, his eyes cold and hard as little stones. "And in light of this incredible generosity you're showing my business, I can finally afford to hire a more professional staff." He gave me a thin, cruel smile. "So, Sarah, thank you for your service. You're fired." The words hung in the air, sucking all the warmth and hope out of the room. "You're fired." It was so absurd, so unbelievably cruel, I actually laughed. A short, sharp, broken sound. After everything, after the storm, the fear, the impossible miracle unfolding outside, this was what it came down to. Mr. Henderson, seeing a golden opportunity, decided the first thing he needed to do was kick out the person who'd made it happen. My miracle was being stolen right out from under me. Bear didn't move a muscle. He just stood there, his calm gaze shifting from my stunned face to Mr. Henderson's smug one. The smile on my boss's face faltered a little under that silent scrutiny. The low rumble of engines outside seemed to deepen, as if the bikes themselves were growling in displeasure. "Did I hear you right?" Bear asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're firing the one decent person in this entire town." "This is my establishment," Henderson puffed, trying to reclaim his authority. "I can hire and fire whomever I please. She's unreliable, always taking time off for her kid. This is a business, not a charity." "You're right," Bear said, nodding slowly. "It is a business." He took a slow step towards Henderson, who involuntarily flinched back. "And it seems my friends and I have made a slight miscalculation." He turned his head and bellowed towards the open door, his voice a force of nature that shook the coffee mugs on the shelf. "Hey, hold up a minute." Instantly, the symphony of engines began to die down. One by one, they sputtered into silence, leaving an eerie quiet in their wake. A few of the bikers who had started to dismount swung their legs back over their seats. All eyes, 1,000 pairs of them, were now fixed on the diner's front door. Bear turned his attention back to the quivering diner owner. "See, we came here today for 2 reasons. The first was to eat at the diner that employs the kind woman who helped us last night. The second was to fix up the place for her, as a thank you." He took another step forward, looming over Henderson. "But it seems this diner no longer employs that woman. So I guess we're only here for one reason now." He reached into his leather vest and pulled out his wallet. He extracted a single, crisp dollar bill and slapped it down on the counter. "I'll take a coffee," he said, his eyes like chips of ice. "To go." Henderson stared at the dollar bill as if it were a snake. His face had gone from smug to panicked to a pasty shade of gray. "Wait. No. You can't. All that business." "Business follows decency, old man," a woman with a bright pink bandana called from the doorway. She was flanked by 2 other bikers, their arms crossed, their expressions grim. "You had a winning lottery ticket in your hand," Bear said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Her name is Sarah, and you just tore it up and threw it in her face." He looked over at me, and his expression softened completely. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gentle again, "I'm sorry about this, but we don't support men like him." He paused, then a slow grin spread across his face. "But the day is young, and 1,000 of us still need breakfast." He turned back to the crowd outside. "New plan," he boomed. "Breakfast is cancelled. We're moving on. But first, a little community project." Before Henderson could protest, 12 bikers were inside. They weren't destructive, they were surgical. One team, with tool belts appearing as if from nowhere, began expertly dismantling the booths, stacking the vinyl seats and tables neatly against a wall. Another group started clearing the kitchen, ignoring Gus, who just stood there, spatula in hand, utterly bewildered. They emptied the walk-in fridge, carrying out boxes of bacon, eggs, and produce. "What are you doing? This is theft!" Henderson shrieked, running around like a headless chicken. "We're accepting your generous donation to a new local enterprise," Bear said calmly, as two huge men carried the industrial coffee machine out the door. "Think of it as a severance package, for Sarah." They moved down the street, this incredible parade of leather-clad movers, and set up shop in the vacant lot next to the bakery. Grills appeared. Folding tables were erected. Within 20 minutes they had a fully functioning outdoor kitchen. Bear walked over to me, took me by the arm, and led me to the center of it all. He pressed a wad of cash into my hand, the proceeds from the diner's entire pantry, sold to the club at a fair price. "You're the boss today," he said with a wink. "You tell us how you like your eggs, and you direct the staff." I stood there, surrounded by the smell of frying bacon and the cheerful chatter of 1,000 new friends. The townspeople were coming out now, drawn by the spectacle, their fear replaced by curiosity and awe. Leo's school bus drove by, and I saw my son's face pressed against the window, his eyes wide as saucers. I gave him a huge, beaming wave. That day I didn't just serve breakfast, I ran a festival. I was no longer a poor, tired waitress. I was the guest of honor, the reason for the celebration. The tips collected in a bucket that overflowed twice. By the end of the day, I had enough money to pay my rent for a year, a full college fund for Leo, and a down payment on a dream. Mr. Henderson stood in the doorway of his empty, silent diner, a ghost in his own failed story. The road vultures and their friends didn't just give me a good tip. They gave me back my dignity. They showed a whole town, and most importantly, me, that a little bit of kindness isn't just a transaction. Sometimes it's an investment that pays off 1,000 times over.